Ladies and gentlemen, if we could please take our seats for the final session.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good afternoon to all. I suspect the others will join us shortly. I believe our last session, the last session we had on access to technology and case studies on access to technology and land, provided a good segue into this session on business services. As we all know, a major inhibitor for rural folk, especially women and youth, is lack of financing or access to finance and business services in general. While many might have access to land or own land, and just to indicate that in my own country, Jamaica, and I think in the rest of the Caribbean, when we were speaking of ownership of land, in my country, land is either owned by the government or owned by individuals. The concept of communal land doesn't exist. But while many might have access to land, they do not necessarily have the resources or the financial means to develop or improve agricultural production beyond subsistence farming. This session with emphasis emphasizes the importance of accessible and efficient business services. The case studies that will be presented will include concrete examples such as access to finance for small and medium businesses, knowledge and skills development, technology, and peer-to-peer learning. We have assembled a group of very qualified individuals who will speak to the issue, and I will introduce them. Mr. Shaban Khalid, who is president of the Commonwealth Alliances of Young Entrepreneurs, and he has also been representing Pakistan since its inception in 2011. Madame Ajarda Diouf, program specialist working on local development, Direction de la Francophonie économique of the OIF. Ms. Ajouye Luhuvilo Sigala, National Program Officer of FAO, who will be focusing on inclusive rural finance, value change development, and youth employment in Tanzania. Mr. Brooke Debebe Agidiu, he's a general manager of Ethio Leather Industry and Deputy Ambassador of the Ethiopian Embassy in Brussels, and a Vice Minister for Trade, Industry, and External Economic Cooperation of Ethiopia. Ms. Patricia Nsime, Program Coordinator of FAO Uganda, who has more than 15 years of experience in agricultural value chain development, contract farming, and microcredit management for small enterprises. And from the floor, we have Ms. Claire Dorney. Without further ado, I will pass to Madame Diouf, who has requested to go first because she has a flight to catch in about 40 minutes, she tells me.
That's fine. Madame, just to tell all the panelists, this is a fairly large, this is 5-member panel, 6-member actually was on the floor. And so hopefully we can keep the comments brief and go to questions. Madame Diouf, in what way has your program been able to provide more accessibility to business services for women and youth?
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the program I'm going to talk about is a French-speaking program to support local development. It supports grassroots communities in coming up with local development programs with the participation of the basic communities. We were present in 16 communities in 4 countries, Senegal, Togo, Rwanda, and the CAR. But as you know, for political reasons, we had to suspend the activities in the CAR. So we are now in 12 communities. And this local development project is in an experimental phase. The aim is to build capacity and strengthening initiatives on the part of grassroots communities. Of course, OIF is not present per se in rural development, but the actions of the local development program do cover rural communities and communities on the urban fringe.
Donc l'objectif ultime, donc c'est
the ultimate aim refers to interacting with public and private authorities in member states. As I said, we are dealing with 12 communities, and we help them to come up with local development plans. Up to now, we have funded and implemented 18 priority projects which benefit 50,000 people. These are projects related to water, hygiene, agricultural production, plant production, etc. We are also dealing with building capacity in the communities, local education, value chains, and specific issues related to the project itself. As regards the impact, we are seeing results from beefing up capacity, making local people aware of the issue, teaching them how to participate in local development plans with a view to coming up with our ultimate objective, which is to help in the elaboration of national policies. This is what we are doing in Senegal. We also have a phase 3, a decentralization, which has learned lessons from our program. So the local development officer will extend the program to other areas of Senegal. I'm speaking here of Senegal, which is a case study, in fact. We are dealing with the fund to encourage the local economy, FIDEL, and the aim here is to have a clear improvement in producers' incomes in a specific village, and this is aligned with Senegal's national development policy. Now, this program, this fund, is one of the 18 projects we financed, which in turn generated finance for 40 other micro projects. So this attests to the OIF's catalyst. We have various people trained by the OIF, and this led to the creation of the fund, the FIDEL, to support those producers having difficulties in accessing funds. The financial services are not well diversified in rural areas and are not tailored to the needs of local producers. So the OIF created this fund, which is the FIDEL fund. It's a guarantee fund so that grassroots communities can access funds. The OIF allocated an amount which was tripled later on, and with that, the self-help associations, cooperatives grant loans to grassroots communities ranging from 1,500 to 3,000 euros. So this program, this particular program, is an answer to the problems, but does it finance seeds, seedlings, etc.? It finances the project itself. So when a project is tabled, obviously there's a feasibility study, etc. Towards a specific end. You might be dealing with women in the processing industries. For example, a women's association say, well, you lend us money, I will buy cereals, I will process those cereals, I will have added value and resell the finished product. It makes it possible, for example, to carry out activities between two harvesting periods.
Okay.
Parce que je sais pas si on vous entend.
Dans la première phase,
So in the first phase, as we are dealing with small amounts, you have to work gradually. We have funded 25 groupings, ranging from, as I said, from 1,500 to 3,000 euros. The activities cover trade, market gardening, processing, etc. And in the second phase, we finance 16 other groupings. We think that as regards the first phase, 27 micro projects, 400 jobs were created. And in the feasibility study on the second phase, we aiming for 1,500 jobs to be created. The Senegalese government has understood the need to replicate this project by adjusting it to Senegalese realities, more to Senegalese realities.
en octroyant des microfinancements.
So in giving such microfinancing, there has been an improvement in living conditions and a 40% increase in income, in revenue. That's average income, as well as ownership of the development. And for young people, how have young people been affected? Do they have more prospects for the future? Well, this project was first of all focused on women, yes. But as you may know, there's a lot of migratory flows here. There are a lot of migratory flows. And what we have noted is that there has been a break on the movement from the rural area to the cities, because people are now earning more in the rural areas. So less people are inclined to go to the cities. They are staying in their villages. For example, we met students who have been working in the fields in order to pay their school fees. If they didn't work in the fields, they would not have had money to go to university, for example. So there's an entire process taking place here. We have also seen that some communities which we helped, which were at a very low level, have moved up a higher step to export their products, moving from the informal sector to the formal sector. Previously, we had just small cooperatives, but with the money injected into them, they managed to get funds from other larger donors, because it's a multiplier effect. So they keep generating income. It's interesting that you have been able to encourage a part of the informal sector to become formal. It's beginning. It's in its infancy, but have you been able to gauge the effect? Well, we did carry out an evaluation study of all the funds, and here is where we began to see results. People didn't have anything at the start, and with the funds they got at their disposal, they began to think about other projects. At the start, you had cereal bags which you made yourself, and people from diaspora bought these cereal bags, and the person would say, well, if you give me more money, I can myself export those bags of cereal. So there are issues of standards, etc. If you want to export, you have to work on a formal level. So it's an ongoing process. And this program is funded in part by the Senegalese government. And who? No, first of all, it was the OIF, but the government of Senegal did make a contribution, because the government saw that the project had a positive impact, so they wanted to expand it. And with what money did they do it? With their own resources. The Senegalese government, with its own resources, has tried to expand the program to 5 of the 14 regions in Senegal. They're also carrying out studies in order to determine how we could have greater impact on job creation. Any comments on this program? Could such a program work in your country?
Le Sénégal, vous parlez?
Senegal? Go ahead. Well, thank you very much. Well, I don't think I need to underline the fact that it works for Senegal, but I'd like to thank Mrs. Diouf for what she has just outlined, and I wanted to take this opportunity to emphasize the importance of ensuring that the 3 main regions covered by South-South cooperation to benefit fully from the initiatives. We have seen there are several initiatives. I think it would be advisable, as several speakers stressed today, to focus on access to means of production. It's a fundamental point. When you are talking about setting the stage this morning, I believe the lady representing the FAO spoke about access to means of production, access to training and technology, and access to financial resources, as Mrs. Diouf has already emphasized. I think it would be advisable to establish a link between all these initiatives, making it possible for the youth and women to have access to means of production, to technology, to capital, to land, but at the same time, you bring and policies coming out of the cooperation, mainly with the European Union. Mrs. Diouf talked about migratory flows just now. It's all linked. As we want to gain access for young people and women to means of production, if that happens, that can have a positive impact on irregular migratory flows. You know that one of the major challenges today, and one of the major problems for the EU and even the ACP, is the issue of illegal migration. So you have access to means of production, to resources, to technology, yes. You have to get to the issue of migration. And I think as regards the follow-up to this symposium, which is an extremely important encounter, we would need to reflect, yes, on South-South cooperation and stress this link. See to it that what is done in cooperation between the ACP and the EU should have a link with all you have talked about today. I think it's an extremely important point. Thank you.
C'est très bon, c'est un bon commentaire.
Yes, that's something a good comment for tomorrow morning's meeting.
Gostaria de fazer uma pergunta à senhora Diouf, se poderia partilhar um.
Yes, just a question. Could Mr. Diouf talk about how she chose the micro projects? How were they identified?
Okay, if there's no further ado, then I will, I think, go to Shaban. We were very gracious to let Madame Diouf go ahead, parce que vous devez partir, hein?
Oui, mais c'est bon.
You need to leave. Oh, no, but I can stay on. Well, as regards micro projects, because I spoke a bit too quickly, I didn't go into detail. The micro projects came out of the local development plans. We supported the local communities, and we helped them come up with their own development plans. And they told us what they needed to develop, what were the community's needs, they identified the various projects, and then they came up with a priority list. And that list of priorities, and this is our experience, I overlooked this aspect just now. They submitted that list to a national follow-up committee made up of various ministries which monitor the program, and then they submitted the list to the OIF. We had that safeguard because it makes it possible for us to have some guarantee as regards financing projects which are in sync with the country's needs, because we are in France. We don't know whether the project is submitted to us a good one or a bad one. We funded projects relating to onion cultivation, but we realized that the government had certain restrictions as regards the cultivation of onions. So we need to have the approval or the endorsement of the local and the national authorities. And once that is done, depending on our budgetary allocation and our own priorities, then we choose the projects. Obviously, we would, the ideal thing would be to have income generating opportunities, but you also have to look at the social component, because if you fund income generating activities and then they tell us, no, it's not this, we want this, and if we fund it nevertheless, they won't use the benefits from the project, or they won't be comfortable with the project at all. So you have the social component as well. So it's on the presentation of the list of projects by the National Oversight Committee that we choose the various projects depending on our budget, depending on our the aspects we want to focus in. Is it income generation or the social aspect? Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Jove.
Shaban Khalid, President of CAYE Asia, the Commonwealth's Alliances of Young Entrepreneurs. You describe yourself as the network of networks, right? How does that really help rural youth in getting access to business services?
We work with the rural youth, but that's one part of our agenda that we work on. But it actually encompasses the bigger theme of this symposium, which is the South-South and triangular cooperation and the youth participation in that. And if I could have my presentation come up and I could give you, so I will just briefly run through the presentation. I think that's going to give you a brief of what we are, what we do, and how we do it. So we basically, as you said, a network of networks. CAI Asia represents 9 countries. Those are the countries with about 18,000 plus young entrepreneurs within the network. We've been able to create about 31,800 jobs, which were linked to our network alone. We've conducted about 1,088 activities within the network, and I'll also brief you about the activities that we've taken on. The knowledge sharing that everyone's been talking about, we've imparted about 20,000 plus young entrepreneurs with knowledge. Essentially, what we're trying to do is make our communities be more job seekers than job creators than job seekers. So that's our basic underlying theme. Next. So the purpose that we came together for is to be able to create a united voice for advocacy, especially with the policymakers, towards creating a better entrepreneurial ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, it includes everything. We've been able to promote cross-border trade, and I'll also explain how we've been able to do that. As everyone's been saying, exchange of ideas, that's one of our core functions. Exchange of innovative ideas, technologies, and skills within the network, and also we do not restrict ourselves to our network of 18,000 entrepreneurs. And as we go on with the presentation, it will be clear. We provide information. This is critical. We are not able to provide access to finance, but we are able to provide information about access to finance, which is absolutely critical. We do a lot of mentoring of new entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs, those who want to be entrepreneurs. We do a lot of so one of the things that we've been able to do through this network is we've been able to bring down barriers and demonstrate the importance and value of regional alliances. And why I say that is it's absolutely essential. The cultural similarities of cross-border, like surrounding nations, are far conducive to promote trade than you would probably have with countries which are further away. For instance, countries within Asia probably have a better understanding of the systems than entrepreneurs from Europe, for instance. Next slide, please. So this is how we do it. We do a lot of country-to-country bilaterals. We have an annual summit, and the purpose of these two things is a lot of B2B meetings. We encourage a lot of these entrepreneurs to come from within these countries, to come together and exchange ideas, learn, actually even try and make deals happen. One of the things that we do is present excellence in action. When I say excellence in action is, we take entrepreneurs to their respective fields of excellence, and we display case studies in those regions where we tell them that this is the kind of practice that you can adopt in your own country, and this is what you may be able to improve on.
Can you give an example of that, specific, concrete?
Agriculture.
Okay.
For instance, one of our entrepreneurs from India who specializes in specialized seed has been able to promote his product in Nepal and Bangladesh, and maybe even Pakistan. So that's one of the very primary examples.
And you take that as a model, and you show the other guys, look, you can do this too.
You can do this. You bring them. So what happened is, essentially we brought them. So one of the summits happened in India, and he's also the former president, Rahul. So they go and experience the yields, the improvement in yields that resulted from the technology that they have, and so on. And I mean, it becomes a two-way street. He gets to export, the other person gets to gain from the import. So it's a business proposition at the end of the day. So remember, we are not development sector. We are entrepreneurs working for entrepreneurs, and to promote entrepreneurial ecosystem.
If I might just interject, Madame Diouf, thank you so much for, merci beaucoup d'être resté avec nous aussi.
Thank you for staying with us as long as possible, Mrs. Diouf. She has a train to catch, so I think we can excuse her.
I mean, is there any way to gauge how much hope you're giving to youth in rural areas by what you're doing? How much are you changing their lives and giving them hope?
One of the things that I was going to touch upon was one of the questions that, and one of the points that was raised and very pertinent and very early on in this session was, we've seen a trend where the younger people are not attracted to staying within the farming. And that's one of the things that I think is absolutely critical, because when you say 60 to 70% of the population is youth, and if they are not going to be staying within the farming, where do you get your food security from? So it is absolutely essential that we start working on, and one of the things that we do is conduct training workshops. And training workshops, it is not enough to give them farming empowerment. You have to give them economic empowerment for them to be able to stay in that profession.
Which means, in other words, giving them a profit motive to stay in it.
And whether that's bringing them up the value chain, a lot of value addition. The terminology value addition was being mentioned earlier on also. It is absolutely essential that just milking the cow is not enough anymore. You have to teach them how to make cheese. You see, that's where the profit is.
Produce. Yeah.
That's where the profit's going to be. So we are trying, I mean, we're very early with this, and we're trying to replicate this across the Commonwealth Asia also. So we're trying to impart them knowledge, training, to be able to move up the value chain.
That means putting together a cooperative in a region, for instance. I mean, they can't produce by themselves.
Cooperative also has other dynamics. One of the points that was raised earlier was the community dynamics.
Yes.
So that is something that needs to be addressed on a separate scale. But not just that, also new technology, whether that's seed technology, irrigation technology. There's a lot in this world that is going on, which a lot of the developing countries, especially the rural areas in these developing countries, do not know of. You don't need like gallons and gallons of water anymore. There's drip irrigation. There's specialized seed, which seed can be specialized to that crop, to that soil, to gain better yields for that crop in that region. So there's a lot of that we're trying to impart. But once again, we're not a development agency. We are entrepreneurs who've volunteered to do this, to impart this knowledge try and make these people better entrepreneurs, give them economic empowerment, and so on and so forth.
One of the things that you mentioned in your talking notes you sent ahead was that you're able to break down barriers.
That is true.
How do you do that? What barriers? What are you talking about?
So I'll give a very specific example. One of the specific examples of India and Pakistan. I come from Pakistan, and we had a bilateral between India and Pakistan, which are known to be arch rivals. But as soon as we went there and they came over, the perceptions are completely different from reality. And that may be true, and not just because we're arch rivals, it's just you sometimes tend to ignore your neighbor. And it sometimes is just not Pakistan, India, or Asia. I think it's across the globe now. You sometimes tend to be more focused on areas which you think are more potential in trade. For instance, there are probably better yields in Kenya today if you sell a product in Kenya today with the economic growth that Kenya has today, than sending it to Europe with all the additional costs of transportation, shipping, and all these other requirements that they have for food. Like for instance, food. They have these stringent laws to get the food to be able to be sold or sellable in Europe. So there's a lot of, so sometimes you ignore these very basic trade opportunities which lie right next door and far greater than one perceives.
I'm just musing with the idea. You're an association of entrepreneurs, but you're also promoting farming as a business. Is this a way of breaking down what some people might see as a stigma to farming, that, I'm just a farmer? No, I'm a business person. Does that break down that sort of image of just the farmer?
So we don't essentially do that only with farmers. We do that across the board with technology, with all kinds of sectors now. Because within the so what has happened is over time we've been able to have these focus sectors within the organization now. And if there's an entrepreneur who's looking for, let's say, what industry could I give you? Energy, for instance, whether that's waste management, energy. We've now identified, been able to now say, okay, fine, I don't have that skill in Pakistan, but you know what, we will connect you to India, and this gentleman in this city within the network is specialized in this field, and why don't you go and contact them? And then they mentor, then he takes them on as a mentor,
right,
and then they keep going. And I think that's a very, I'll tell you this, it is very essential. We have over time observed that young people understand and relate to young people more. They will understand the language better, faster, easier. So I think that becomes absolutely essential to the success of our model also. And once again, we are not, we cannot thank enough. Our mentor has been Commonwealth Secretariat. They gave us the hand-holding to put us together, get this alliance formed, and then once the ball got rolling, now I can kind of say the alliance is now on their own. But we still need a lot of support, because when you were talking about this massive coordination, you need support.
Exactly. I mean, how can you scale this up through South-South and triangular? How do you see this?
So that's my last presentation, my last slide in the presentation. So our model has been endorsed by the Commonwealth Heads of Governments and the Ministers of Youth. And we're already, we're already being replicated successfully, obviously with the support of, once again, Commonwealth Secretariat in the Caribbean, and then very soon the East Africa. East Africa is already there. The next steps will be Southern Africa, West Africa, and the Pacific. And then eventually what we want to do right now, it's Kai Asia, and then Kai Africa separately, or Kai East Africa separately, Kai Caribbean. But eventually we want to give them an umbrella organization, so then we club it globally. So that outreach and it just becomes much massive. And then, as I said earlier, accessing resources to strengthen the networks, and that's absolutely going to be critical in scaling it, and then sustainability. So, and that's what we're going to be trying to do.
Does anyone here see their country participating in a network like that? Oui, monsieur. Could you explain why? Why do you think?
Nabicham from the Youth Employment Agency in Ghana.
Youth Employment Agency in Ghana.
In Ghana, yes. We have developed a module, Youth in Agribusiness, okay? And we see Shaban's model as a template upon which we can use to improve our module. And it will be a great idea to connect to Shaban's organization and learn best practice from him.
Very interesting. Anyone else? Oui, thank you.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, we are told this morning, and we all know, that governments do not provide jobs. They are the engines of growth. It is the private sector that is to drive this. And listening to Shaban, what he has done, it will go a long way to increase the capacities of young entrepreneurs, which will go down, in recruiting, employing, and also getting more of the youth to ride on their backs. And in so doing, issues of unemployment will be kept. So I think at this symposium, it is very, very important that all actors, and especially governments, should see how private individuals who are entrepreneurs can be supported through such a corporation, that they are capacitated, in the diverse businesses in which they have, that they can grow and have that kind of network. And for me, it gives us a brighter future if we are to say that we are leaving no one behind by 2030.
And that includes business people. Yes.
Thank you. I'd just like to add to Shaban's comment about that young people listen to young people and really resonate with what other young people are saying. And through our work with the CHI networks, and actually through a previous life engaging with entrepreneurs, what I also found is that entrepreneurs are actually a unique breed unto themselves, and they're very fast moving. They have a risk appetite, very dynamic, and a lot of perseverance and pushing through, and really looking for new ideas to exploit. And I think that sort of mindset responds to other people with that kind of mindset. And so young entrepreneurs, actually supporting young entrepreneurs and talking about what's important for them, is far more powerful than a development agency or a government agency talking about what young entrepreneurs need. And that's been actually incredibly powerful as we've given platforms for the CHI team to speak with ministers and speak with heads of government, to really be able to communicate that message straight from the mouths of the young people who it's affecting. It's been quite powerful.
Shaban, last word before we go on.
So one of the new pushes that we have now is to advocate to our governments that entrepreneurship should be part of the curriculum from an early age. And that's going to be absolutely essential, because we believe now that it is not something that you have to start at maybe at a university level. It can be started way earlier. And I'll give an example. There was a workshop that we conducted at 14 to 17-year-old kids at a school. And when we started that workshop, there were only 2 hands that were raised who wanted to be entrepreneurs. By the end of the workshop, 80% of the hall, just by basic understanding of what entrepreneurship is at their level, as I said, young people communicating young people, basic understanding of what a business is and how you can start a business. At the end of the workshop, which was about a 2-hour workshop, 80% of the hall said they wanted to be entrepreneurs, because the basic understanding was not there. But with that basic, one last comment that I would like to close with. I am not sure if this is the misunderstanding or the impression that I gave. I am not CHI. We have a very organized system. We have a board of directors from each country. I'm only here for 1 year. We have a rotating presidentship, and I think that's part of the sustainability process, and it's absolutely important to mention that. One country or one person has not been able to take over CHI. Each year we change presidency, and until the rotation has been completed within the 9 countries, whether small country or large country, your influence is the same. That is absolutely essential. I would ideally, with having heard the conversation that we did today, and it's lovely, it is absolutely one of the things we need in the developing countries. We have to empower youth in the right direction. And I cannot stress more than the fact that, and it's been said before, and I'm going to say it again, if we do not direct them in the right direction, this economic opportunity will turn into an economic challenge and a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shaban. One interesting aspect that Madame Diouf raised that I've heard in a couple of conversations in the breaks is about the informal economy and how that's such a big part of some economies in the ACP, and how to move economy. Anyway, just to throw that out, that maybe we can talk about that before the end of this session. Claire Dornick, how can your agency give perspective to youth in agriculture? Turn on the microphone.
I want to introduce myself first, because I think I'm the only representative of the Pacific, which I thank the ACP, FAO, and l'Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie to have allowed the Pacific to come, maybe contribute to the South-South cooperation. But on the Pacific, our main industry is the coconut. I don't know if in Africa or in the Caribbean. I know they have coconut, but I don't think so. They really involve themselves in coconut. But there is an error, because the coconut is the tree of life. And the coconut, you can be used everything. And so I'm talking about the Pacific. I think the ambassador of Fiji will support a little bit my presentation today, because I feel very lonely in the middle of all the African and the Caribbean in that room, and I feel very shy to be talking, but I'm talking especially on the copra industry, because for centuries now we remain on the copra industry, but it's an industry that is declining and is almost associated to poverty.
So how do you lift that up? How do you do that?
And I have to explain to you how is done the copra every day. Is a family business involving the mothers, the grandmothers, the grandfather, and the children. And youth now, they like to accompany the parents and grandparents, but now when they pass a teenager, they get not interested, because they can see that it's not contributing to the future.
Exactly. How to give them a perspective to want to remain.
If we want to change declining, I heard all my colleagues women, and I'm proud of them, because I think the women are very entrepreneur. I'm sorry to tell that we need men too, but the women are more entrepreneur.
Why is that? Why?
For example, I come from...
will some men take issue with that, please?
Yes, I can tell you something. I'm still criticizing my own race. My mother is from Futuna Island. The woman goes at work, and they make the plantation. They go fetch for the fish to feed the family. and make the plantation of taro, of vegetable. And the man the night goes at the cava and drink. So what do you think about that life?
I would sign on.
And when I heard about the cashew business, and why the cashew business, I heard all these women talking about good thing. The business are working very well.
Yes.
And for the women, for the youth. But if I talk to the copra that is declining, why is that so?
Yes.
Because we have not gone to the step that I'm fighting since June 2009.
Which is?
At ACP, I want to propose that we have a Pacific regional coconut development to go for higher value. Until today, nobody want to hear about go for higher value on the coconut.
Well, let's hear it now. How do you do it? How would you propose that we do this?
It require big investment. That we are only. I'm a businesswoman. Communities oriented. Maybe you don't believe that some people still have the. For me, it's a passion. I look after the rural areas. I have put all my life for 25 years in Vanuatu. That is not my country, but it became my home.
So this is more an expression of frustration than of a project that works.
Yes.
How do we take what you're saying to tomorrow for an action plan? What do you propose?
I need the help of ACP to do South and even I'm sure in Mozambique or the places they have coconut, they go for higher value themselves too. And I will be the first one to be going together with them, and we fight for. Not only for the Pacific, I've been fighting for the Pacific, but we feel just useless.
I think Mr. Gomes needs to answer this later. Unless you want to answer it now.
Maybe he's frightened now of women talking too much.
Okay.
So that's what we need. Investment is not even we need to be able to access even on loan or whatever to improve the process. Because we cannot remain only on copra itself. We can exploit the full coconut itself, and it gives different figure.
Okay, would anyone else like to comment before?
Thank you, Chris.
Sierra Leone. Right?
My name is Lilian Lewelu, and I'm a proud Pacific woman. So I'm going to uplift the Pacific.
From which country? Where?
From Tuvalu. And I work for the Tuvalu Embassy here in Brussels. Just to respond to what Claire said, of course, coconut industry in the Pacific needs to be upscaled in a level where the value of the coconut can be taken up and done in a way that can be commercialized. But then in the Pacific, you have to be realistic whether there are some countries that are very small, like Tuvalu, the small island states, atoll countries, which the coconut industry might not be the appropriate, product that needs to be here. But it's the ocean. We're surrounded by the ocean, and so the blue economy, the ocean economy, we need to look at that area. How can we, within the South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, take that on board and look at the small states? Because when at the end of the day today, we talk about, of course, I think it's really good to know about what's happening in Africa, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific. But even within the Pacific, you have smaller countries that are really already affected by climate change. So we need to look at that area. That I think what should come out of this symposium is to look into what can the South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, take into account the smaller countries like Tuvalu, where there's no way we'll be able to grow what African countries are successful in doing it. So in response to what Claire was saying, of course the coconut, in Tuvalu, if you take the virgin coconut oil, cold-pressed coconut oil from Tuvalu, it's different from countries that are volcanic countries, because in Tuvalu the coconut grows on really less water level, on atolls. And I can share that with anyone, because there's a big difference between a cold-pressed coconut virgin oil in an atoll that's grown or cold-pressed in an atoll country compared to other bigger volcanic countries in the Pacific. But I think that's one area we can explore and look at and support what Claire is coming from, to build that into an industry that is useful for what Claire has been fighting for in past many years. But that we need to take into account that there are smaller countries that might just take that on board as a mini enterprise. But the blue economy, the ocean economy, what we can take out of the ocean, Tuvalu is surrounded by the sea. Its exclusive economic zone is the main income that's coming in. But with U.S. tech coming out of the fisheries area, that's another issue we need to look at. So probably what I'm saying is that it's not just the coconut in the Pacific. You have to look at other areas where land is not an issue. The ocean is an issue. And for Tuvalu, for small countries like Tuvalu, Kiribati, we need to seriously look and see if the South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, can take into account the ocean economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry we have to move on. Very interesting issue to deal with, and
Sure, because it's interesting to see the figure too.
I realize that. I saw a couple of slides, but so sorry. We need to move on. Brooke, if you
The leather.
Yeah. Just a piece of advice. How does it take it?
Actually, I think I'm the only one of the panelists from the manufacturing sector. I would have been out of place, but fortunately leather is an extension of agriculture because it's agro-processing. We produce finished leather from sheep, goat, and hides. We can produce any color, any thickness, provided the nature limits. We are producing such kind of leather from the thing. I'm sure most of you have seen hides, raw hides and skins. Coming up with such products is one thing. We didn't stop with finished leather. We also produce shoes, leather garments, ladies' bags, and leather small articles. So it's an agro-processing business. We annually, 2015 was a bad business for us, but in 2016 we forecast that we'll do $80 million business. It's export and domestic consumption. We have a profit motive, but we employ a lot of people. The company I work with is 1,300 employees. 65% are women. Last 2 years back, we established a shoe factory, and we had to hire 273 young people. 255 of them are from young girls from, who drops out for many reasons from high schools. So we have created that opportunity, employment opportunity. You raise the issue of micro business.
Yes.
In Ethiopia, we have a number of women-owned micro enterprises doing ladies' bags, small leather articles, and so on. And mostly the emphasis here is lack of finance and land. For those micro-enterprises, market access was their problem. UNIDO has worked out, they formed clusters of micro-enterprises, and we got big business from the US, like 20,000 laser wallets per month, which we cannot produce it ourselves, so we wanted to outsource it. We succeeded in finding only a small number of them, which can supply us 2,000 wallets per month. Unfortunately, we are trying to convince UNIDO to support them in machineries. We have to convince the government to provide them with land. We can give them the market and the skill. So we can expand the production not only within our company, we can expand it to the small enterprise, women entrepreneurs. We have planned to produce football shoes. The footballs is handmade. We have to go for moccasin shoes. It's handmade. We cannot do it in the factory. We have to outsource it. So with employment, we can't do that.
So how is this outsourcing financed? I mean, how do you help to arrange money for these smaller producers can produce for you?
We can give them the laser, the accessories from our side, from which we
So the materials.
The materials. We can train them. We can provide training.
Financing?
Financing in Ethiopia, we have the microfinance is very strong. They can get the finance, but their problem is to look and buy the equipment and machineries, which we are asking UNIDO to participate in that process. The municipalities have built bigger working places, but unfortunately there is no power in it. So we are asking them to give them power so that we can. It's the interest of the government as well, because it's export product.
Yeah.
And foreign exchange for Ethiopia is a really important revenue. So we're trying to work with that. That's how we create employment, not only in our factories, also indirectly by outsourcing.
Okay, you've spoken from a national level. I mean, how can South-South and Triangular fit in here?
Yeah, unfortunately, we had more of North-South collaboration because we reached to this level of quality because we have connections with German buyers, Italian buyers, and Japanese buyers. And the chemical suppliers also to sell their chemicals, they give us some technology.
But this is on a purely business level. You're not dealing with government support.
No,
Yes.
business, not government support. It's business because the buyers are private companies from Europe. Within Africa, there are attempts. I know Botswana has been sending delegations to Ethiopia. Mostly they were discussing with us. So they decided to establish a integrated laser park. They invited us to participate in the joint venture, but unfortunately we didn't have the resources to do that. Kenya had sent a number of delegations, and lastly we had a visit from His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, and now Kenya has decided to establish the integrated laser park. So with this type of activities is there, but what remains is to get us work together.
And how do you do that?
I think that will fall under COMESA, ECOWAS, and SADC because they can create business-to-business forums. We had business-to-business forums with Europe, with Canada, US, and Japan. No, we haven't done it for Africa.
So this is business-to-business aspect. In fact, you're not even talking about South or Triangular at all.
It's business.
Or are you? It's business.
It's business.
But is there any way that can be facilitated by South-South and Triangular from an from an FAO standpoint or UN standpoint, or?
I think for this sector UNIDO could be involved.
Yes.
Because UNIDO has been working with us to develop the Ethiopian laser sector.
Okay.
That experience can now. Last week they had sent a delegation. UNIDO has sent a delegation from Nigeria to Ethiopia for experience sharing. So this type of arrangement with NIDO can create the South-South cooperation.
Maybe there's potential for the training, for the microfinancing, for, okay. Let's, any comment on that before we move on, because we're nearing the end here. Why don't we move on to
Thank you. FAO country office is currently focusing on youth employment and, of course, young women and men, including, of course, elder women. So in order to facilitate that, we are employing the Junior Farmer Field and Life Skills methodology, which is a methodology that you actually focus on farmer field schools, but with a special focus on life skills. And of course, as we all know, youth have different challenges apart from adults. So with the methodology, we are trying to impose or to coach them on how to do agriculture differently, because as the previous speakers have mentioned that agriculture is seen as a poor man's business. So to unlock that, because we also see a lot of potential in agriculture as a country, to unlock that, you also need to include life skills that go hand in hand as they are learning agriculture. To give specific example, maybe as much as youth are trained to apply good agronomic practices, we also train them on how to plan their life, as much as they are planning to know exactly how much am I going to plant this season and how much they should expect as harvest. They should also plan as a human being. What am I planning this year and where do I want to be in 2 years? Going to the question of services, Tanzania, unfortunately, is one of the countries that has the worst extension delivery services system. So with young farmers, we try to train them to be trainers to other farmers doing agriculture. It depends on which enterprise a youth group decides to go. Let's say it's horticulture. So we train them how to train others to do horticulture instead of depending on the government extension system, which is actually can't reach everybody.
That follows on what we just said about how youth tend to
the fact that the future belongs to the organized. And in order to link young farmers doing agriculture with buyers or other value chain actors, it's more easier when they are organized. So we always emphasize on a group of farmers coming together with a specific objective, specific activities, so other value chain actors can identify how they can engage the young farmers. But also on the question of access to finance, it depends on, we always try to see what do they need the finance for. If it's equipment, we link them with equipment suppliers. Some equipment suppliers, of course, small equipment, are willing to lend equipment to young farmers, which they have to pay slowly as they are doing their business. But also in terms of access to finance, we are currently working with the NMB Foundation, which is a representative of the Rabobank Foundation. As we all know, the Rabobank Foundation has a long history on cooperatives. Unfortunately, Tanzania is one of the countries that has a bad history on cooperative. So through this initiative, we try to show farmers that if you come collectively in form of a cooperative, actually things can happen. And apart from giving them access to finance, we first concentrate on training on financial management, try to improve their financial literacy levels before they can actually access the finance part of it. And in terms of access to land,
Yes.
I must say, if you want to produce something as a youth, it's easy if you go to the village executive and actually tell them that what you actually want. And it's possible for Tanzania to be allocated with a certain piece of land which you can do the production. And unfortunately, land has not really been helpful in terms of access to finance. As much as you can use it as a collateral to access finance, but that has not been very helpful. But at least they have this access to land for which it's the government that is actually enforcing it, and it's not really a problem. But the question comes to how much land do you want? We don't emphasize on having access to big plots of land while maybe the productivity levels are very low, so we concentrate on efficiency. How much are you able to produce in this 1 acre piece of land before you ask for a second acre? So our trainings are mostly focused on good agricultural practices to be able to harvest more what you could harvest last year than what you can harvest this year. But also in terms of services, we have seed supplying companies. These are private companies like Yara and Baton. We have linked some youth groups to Yara and Baton to supply them with seeds. And these two companies are among the companies that are confident with what they supply. So instead of supplying seeds only to be not well managed on the farm, at the end of the day to get poor harvest and to create a bad business image for them, once they supply seeds, they also come with a package of how to actually handle that plant on the farm. So at the end of the day, good harvest is, they can harvest good, and of course that is creating more opportunities for them as companies.
How do you measure the success of what you're doing? It sounds like a lot of great things, but is there, in terms of measurement?
Okay. With the junior farmer field schools methodology, can you take me to the second slide, sorry? Yes, this one. The methodology was firstly introduced in Mozambique, and it was focusing on orphans and children affected with HIV/AIDS. And of course, it was later adapted in the refugee communities in Kenya and partly in Uganda. But also, later on, it was also adapted in Sudan, of course, involving these young soldiers. And later, in 2007, it was also adapted in other conflict areas like the West Bank and Gaza. And in 2009, that is when we started using this methodology in youth employment. And in terms of measurements, every time we have a group of young people coming for a training, let's say 20 young people, we always ensure at least 10 of them are young women. So in terms of gender balance, I think we are doing good with the methodology. But to add on that, the Ministry of Agriculture in Tanzania has currently revised the farmer field school curricula to include the subject of life skills, and mostly focusing on women, because as much as women and men participate in agriculture, women have other roles, as the previous speakers mentioned, unfortunately not paid, something that they cannot make money out of it. And since the program started, of course, FAO has facilitated trainings to at least 250 young farmers, that is in Tanzania, for which each young farmer on average was able to create a group of 20 members. So you take 250 times 20, you get about 500 young farmers being trained on the methodology, half of them being young women.
Adzanyo, thank you very much. Any comment on that? Can anyone see that being applied in their country? It's already traveled to other countries as well. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you very much. I work for CTA in the Technical Center for Agriculture and Rural Cooperation in the Netherlands, and we cover ACP countries in general. I would like to first of all say that we have indeed encountered cases in which the Junior Farmer Field School has been very effective, so I would like to really commend FAO for that, and I think that it is a project, an initiative that can usefully applied in many countries, in all countries. Okay. Now I would like to raise quickly another issue, which is a sector in which youth entrepreneurship can also be strengthened, that we have not covered really much here. We see today that young people are more and more interested in developing ICT applications, mobile application that can target agriculture and strengthen the agricultural value chains. For example, at CTA we have been working on a program
in Ghana, our president over the last 2 years initiated a project like that known as YES, the Youth Enterprise Support, similar to what my friend has discussed. But I have a concern, and this concern has been shared by two speakers, she and then my friend Songhai Center. And I wish to use this opportunity to appeal to all world actors who can bring about this change, that a transformation in agriculture needs to be solved in a holistic approach. You will realize from her speech that Yara, who provides seed to youth groups in Tanzania, follow up with other incentives or packages. The problem of agriculture in Africa and West Africa specifically has 5 related issues: land development, water management practices, improved seed, fertilizers and herbicides availability, and marketing. A piecemeal treatment of any of these do not give us the desired result. So in our resolve to get all of us move on the same pedestal, let us also begin to look at this stage. At what level, at what stage can we all come together to harness resources that we have seen that 85% of the total world food produced is not by the multilateral companies, but it is produced by the youth and women in rural areas around the world. If really we want them to become stakeholders and active members, then these 5 major areas or barriers to agriculture are what we need to look at, and look at them in a holistic way. Thank you.
It's true. Thank you. It's true that in most economies, the biggest producers in a group are not the big companies, but the small companies. Let's finish with a final with a
Okay, thank you. Maybe I would like just to give a bit of background on the dairy value chain. If it's possible, I can have that slide, please. So the dairy value chain in Uganda, I should say, has been very successful and very sustainable. We have seen it have a hopeless people become hopeful people. It has grown from a place of security to eminence. So I think we have a lot to learn from it. I've learned a lot from it myself, though I was part of the team that was facilitating it. So initially we looked at the needs of these people, these dairy farmers, and there was mainly access to market, access to finance, access to market information, to extension services, to access to inputs. And then we looked at how they were supposed to access these services, not necessarily us jumping into providing these services, but rather look at the stakeholders that we are supposed to help them get these services, so that we see where they were stranded and just facilitate the process. And so we looked at the private sector, the processing plant, the milk processing plant that should be buying milk from these dairy farmers, and then looked at the bottlenecks, which was mainly establishment of a collection center to ensure a longer shelf life for milk, and also look into the transportation issues, because the place they were staying in, it was not easy to reach out to the market. We looked at the extension services which should have been offered by the government. But as we brought together the stakeholders, we realized the government wouldn't have enough extension staff to go out to reach out sufficiently to the farmers. So we trained the community, what we call the community-based facilitators, whom I'm glad to report that these were mainly youth, and they continue offering these services. They were not being paid by the project, but they were being paid by the farmers themselves willingly, because the farmers found it easier to pay for them other than call for a vet doctor. It was much cheaper for them and more convenient for them. So it was also a way of employing the youth in one way or the other. And then eventually, because the arrangement was such that the payments of the milk had to be through a financial institution, because of the regular payments, this improved on the credit worthiness of the farmers. So they were able to better access the credit. And this has also been helpful also for the young people and the women, because their credit worthiness was improved that way. And then the farmers cooperative itself, which was of course improved on from more of an informal group to a powerful cooperative today, had created a revolving fund where every month they save something. Then after 6 months, they buy for their members animals, which also again helped out the youth and the women who couldn't afford the buying the dairy animals on their own without that kind of scheme. And so the same on the side of the input credit, the processing plant could confidently give credits in terms of inputs to the farmers, knowing that at the end, at the payment period, they could easily reduce from the payments of the milk and recover the money. And then the cooperative itself also was supported to start a drug shop in the area. And given that there are good records of the milk sales at the collection centers, they are able to also give inputs in form of in credit form, so it made it much more affordable. And then this initiative has been shared in different countries, especially Rwanda and Burundi and DRC, because the project covered all those countries. But even up to Southern Sudan, we have had people come to learn from it. And it was being funded by the Italian cooperative development cooperative, which I believe triangulates the initiative. And so we have, okay, of course we still need some technical sharing with the other countries who can learn from us, and also we go out and learn from them, and more support in that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you. Another final hopeful word from your program that we can, I'm sure, discuss tomorrow as possible part of the action plan. Ambassador, could you please give us your final comments to this very enlightening panel? I think we had some very interesting ideas.
Yes, very, very enlightening indeed. And we have our work cut out for us tomorrow to try to distill the very interesting information and comments we have received on the experiences of countries in the South. And I think to some extent they probably rival those countries in the North who have all the technology at their disposal in how we do agriculture. But just quickly to sum up, I won't go into details on each presentation, but Madame Diouf, who has left us, she focused on the importance of building capacities of local communities, with the aim of and stressed the importance of interaction between the public and the private entities in building awareness of youth and women entrepreneurship in agriculture. She, in response to that, very, very interesting from the representative, I believe, of Senegal, and he stressed three important points: access to means of production, access to training and technology, and access to resources. But these should not be seen in isolation, but should be linked. These are initiatives which should be linked in one continuum. Then Shabin spoke of South-South cooperation in the Commonwealth Asia, and where it's not really agriculture per se, but it's really instilling in young people the exchange of innovative ideas, knowledge, technology transfer, information on how to access finance, and it's in his example, very, very important example he gave was the importance of cross-border trade, how stimulating this kind of technology transfer and so on can promote cross-border trade relations. Then Claire spoke to the issue of the coconut project in the Pacific, a project that we too in the Caribbean are very, or the issue in the Caribbean, we are very much aware of that, because we also have seen a decline in the production of agriculture, of coconuts, which was not due entirely to what happened internally, but because of market influences. And we know the promotion of coconut many years ago. Internationally, coconut was seen as a health hazard, and that decimated or contributed to the decimation of the coconut industry in many of our countries. And it's only now coconut is now fashionable once more, and we find that people are going into production, but at the very large scale. So countries like those in the Pacific, those in the Caribbean, with very small acreage of land on which to produce coconut, we are now at a disadvantage. Many of our coconut trees have disappeared. It's no longer productive to cultivate coconuts. But we know, and the Secretary General knows as well, that we have a project the Caribbean and the Pacific intra-ACP project that we're working on to revive the coconut industry. And perhaps this is one of the areas we can look at when we are discussing the outcome of this event tomorrow. Very interesting comment on the blue economy, and this is not only true for the Pacific Island states. I think it is true for all small island developing states. As much as we talk about agriculture, the fact that we are small, it means that we have limited land on which to cultivate. So some islands might be bigger than others, but the small island developing states, for the most part, we do have limited land space. And to the extent that the blue economy, emphasis on the blue economy can be strengthened, I think this is another way to go in order to transform our economies. Brooke spoke about agro-processing in the leather business and the potential there, even though it's now strictly a private sector entity or industry in Ethiopia, the potential for cross-border training or training in other ACP countries to see how applicable this could be. Madame Sigala spoke about agriculture being seen only as a poor man's business. That might be true at some level, but when we look at, say, the United States, for example, and in Europe, it's certainly not a poor man's business. And I think while we might not be able to reach that level, it's certainly something we can aspire to in our own way in terms of our young people and our women, how we can lift them out of poverty, because that is something I think which perhaps should have resonated in the forum today. What has been the impact on the youth and women in agriculture? How has it affected poverty levels in our respective countries? Because we know that traditionally farming, small-scale farming in rural areas in our countries have been done by the poorer people in our society. How have all these examples we have given, how have they benefited our countries and particularly the poor women and the youth? There was a comment related to the development of ICT applications. Young people now, they are so far ahead of most of us that this is something we should start thinking seriously about, harnessing how we can use technology and attract youth to agriculture. Finally, the importance of a holistic approach to agriculture. This was mentioned by, I believe, our the last person who intervened, that we should not approach it in a piecemeal fashion, but in a holistic way, and that women and young people should become stakeholders in what we do, and the need, of course, to break down barriers. And just one final comment to wrap up, based on my observations. I think what it has demonstrated, certainly to me, is the importance of promoting rural development and the interests of women and youth in an intentional way. It can't be haphazard. And perhaps one of the takeaways is to see the extent to which our own governments can be intentional in promoting this, based on the comments that have been made, the interventions and the presentations. It appears that much of this is from the grassroots level, going up, and I think in some cases we perhaps should be insisting that our governments have a top-down approach, come up with programs that will facilitate the involvement of women and young people. And I could give you just one example from Jamaica, and that is an Irish potato program that we have. And this program was promoted as one of the strategies in our country to reduce the food import bill by growing more of what we consume. And as it relates to youth and women, the program provided 100% support for production of 40 hectares under the youth and women component. That was free. So you had the land, And the government provided 100% support in terms of selection of the site, soil preparation, crop planting, fertilizer, and so on. And you sell the product on the market. It benefited the country in that we saved foreign exchange, or we are saving foreign exchange instead of importing, and it provided employment for youth and women. The other example is agro-parks, that the government is investing in large tracts of land and inviting individual farmers, women included, who perhaps would have been farming on small plots of land, to farm on these big agro-parks, and the proceeds, they sell them, or they get a fraction of the sale of the products, and these products are then exported, or they form part of the agro industry. So these are ways, I believe, that we should encourage our governments. It should not only be a top-up approach, but also the governments need to be more intentional, whether it's financing, whether it's providing land, whatever it may be, but it has to be a relationship at the grassroots level as well as the government level. And then, of course, to see how we can replicate this as part of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. Thank you.
Ambassador McNish, thank you very much, and thank you to all of the panelists today. I'd like to excuse the panelists from the panel at this point, and Secretary General Gomes is going to give us some final comments. I'd just like to give a final comment that the speeches at the beginning set the stage, that they gave the sense of urgency to this. At stake is the very stability of some societies. If we don't put together a good plan to make